And what is the vision did you carry into the public services?
Okay. I think the vision still remains essentially one of promoting what you consider the best Indian values.
What do you think about the recent Pakistan-Afghanistan confrontation?
They operate at many levels. One level could be purely, tactical, security related. Enemy's enemy is a friend.
The current Indo-US trade.
So I think in the long run, things will find their balance.
Welcome to Jotwani Legal Talks. My name is Dinesh Jotwani. I'm an advocate with nearly 30 years of legal practice experience. As we know, law and policy are intertwined and they go hand in hand. As the world's largest democracy, India's legal and justice system carries immense responsibility. A more informed public, aware of its rights, duties, and governance framework is the key to strengthen all our institutions. Through Jotwani Legal Talks, I bring to you experts from law, policy, government, diplomacy, and business to share the insights and experience. Today, we are honored to have Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhaya ji, a distinguished diplomat and scholar whose career spans over 3 decades service in Indian foreign services. He's represented India in Mexico, France, Cuba, Syria, Afghanistan, and Myanmar, and has served in key roles at the Ministry of External Affairs, Defense, and Defense Ministry. He has been also represented India at India's permanent mission at United Nations. Ambassador Mukhopadhaya played a pivotal role in reopening the Indian embassy in Kabul in the year 2001 after the fall of Taliban, and later served as an ambassador to Afghanistan, Syria, Myanmar, advancing India's strategic development and cultural engagement with these regions. As an alumni of Doon School, St. Stephen's, and Delhi School of Economics, he brings to diplomacy a rare blend of intellectual depth, field experience, and human perspective. In this episode of Jotwani Legal Talks, I'll explore his extraordinary journey from diplomacy in conflict zones to India's evolving global energy, to currently what is happening in the trade relations with some of the countries, and in many ways in which foreign policies, law, and governance intersect in a rapidly changing and challenging world. Stay tuned for a deeply insight conversation with Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhaya ji. And if you enjoy this discussion, don't forget to like, subscribe, and press the bell icon to stay updated with Jotwani Legal Talks. Ambassador Mukhopadhaya ji, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
You had a remarkable career in IFS, spanning postings from France and Cuba and United Nations and high-stakes ambassador countries like Syria, Afghanistan, and Myanmar. As you know, many of the law students that we have as subscribers are preparing for UPSC simultaneously. And when they do LLB, simultaneously they start preparing for examination. Could you perhaps take us, maybe introduce yourself and then take us towards why you chose foreign services as a career, what motivated you, and what is the vision did you carry into the public services?
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Jotwani, for inviting me to your talk series. It's a pleasure to be here and to address your clients and your audience in this respect. So I think you've already introduced me, I think quite amply and perhaps even more so. So let me just tell you how I got into the service. And it's, kind of tempting to give it a spin and make it a little more engaging or attractive, just to grab your viewers. But in fact, the reality is actually pretty prosaic and not very dissimilar from most people. But let me just say that I didn't start off from a kind of interest or passion in diplomacy. I landed up more by chance. The disciplines that I studied, initially history, in St. Stephen's College and later sociology in Delhi School of Economics. In a way, you could say history would have led me to political science or international relations and then diplomacy. What about the vision? Yeah, I think the vision still remains essentially one of promoting what you consider the best Indian values, but also India's development. I mean, it is often said that what is the purpose of diplomacy is to really promote the well-being of your people, and a good part of that well-being comes from economic and other opportunities, economic and cultural opportunities. So I would see diplomacy as an opportunity to promote and enlarge the scope for development, employment, creativity, um, role in the world. And you can see that all this is not confined to the IFS. A lot of people are doing great things in the world of business. We all know the great success stories on their own. So, to some extent, almost everybody is a potential diplomat.
Correct, correct. That's the true spirit. I mean, we see people joining UPSC for several reasons, including power and the glory that it brings. But yes, one of the main reasons remain that you are able to serve your country, you are able to serve your community at the end of the day. And I'll ask more questions on that, especially the cultural diplomacy that we do in sitting in the embassies across the world. India is a powerhouse, a cultural powerhouse, and how do we use that in diplomacy? Perhaps I'll ask you more question, but I think one of the very significant uh, pass that you had was when you reopened the Indian embassy in Kabul post 2001. We'd like to know more about that experience of yours. How did you navigate? There were a lot of demands from every side globally, and this was perhaps one of the challenging decisions. And what values you anchored when you were making this decision? So perhaps a little light on that will be really good for
Right,
not
right.
only diplomacy but even for legal purposes.
Yeah. Yes, it was an unusual, maybe one you could say even a one of a kind assignment in a diplomatic career, because it's very rare that a country that is so key to your history and to your foreign policy and to your generally sort of international relations, there should be a moment, that you had interrupted your diplomatic relations for 6 years during the time of the Taliban, and the country was virtually under Pakistani tutelage. 9/11 had taken place. Afghanistan became a center for international and regional terrorism used by Pakistan in many ways. So it was really both a challenge and a risk. So, at that time, I happened to be completing my course at the National Defense College. And I was invited by the Foreign Ministry and asked and given 24 hours to consult my family and come back if I would be willing to volunteer for the post in Afghanistan to reopen the embassy. Remember, what had happened was 9/11 had taken place. The United States had intervened in Afghanistan, backing the Northern Alliance, which was then in the northern parts of Afghanistan. And the Northern Alliance really led the offensive, backed to some extent by the Americans, in particular the CIA, to 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 take control of the country. And by the end of I forget the exact dates. By the end of October, beginning of November, they had actually taken over Kabul. And our political authorities and our foreign policy authorities, particularly the person entrusted with the task, was a very veteran and outstanding diplomat, Ambassador Satinder Lamba. Um, he was entrusted, and he took the decision that we should not lose any time. We should reopen our embassy in Kabul immediately. We had already had very close relations with the Northern Alliance, whose great leader, Ahmed Shah Massoud, had just died prior to 9/11. And so the decision was taken that we would be among the first countries to reopen, those who had closed their embassies, to reopen the embassy. Why did they select me? I think, very little good reason. I just happened to be available at the right level of seniority. But something that might have factored in was that as a student in my master's year, I had traveled overland. I'd flown to Kabul and had traveled overland to Europe and back. And therefore, at least I had some, student familiarity with Afghanistan. And so that's how and it was a blind mission. We didn't have any presence. There was no radio, there was no media, forget television. The, the only thing was the place was crawling with international reporters, including a few Indian reporters who came shortly after. And uh, we didn't have a place to stay. We just had the embassy building, which also had been affected by the war. So the first tasks were really just setting up your eyes and ears and setting up your spaces. We didn't have vehicles. We recovered vehicles from the next door Indonesian embassy, things that had not worked for years. We got them running. Communications. There was, without telephones, there were no communications. We resorted to using satellite phones. Initially, these were open, but gradually we learned how to, fix them to a fax machine and encrypt messages and send messages encrypted. So I used to have basically a once a day call from Delhi to check what we were doing. And then we were making contacts at the ground level with the acting administration. Then the Bonn conference took place and there was an interim administration. So it was those initial steps that we took. And as I said, it was basically a blind mission and you had to grope and feel your way to it until by about 3 months, the government had already decided to send an experienced and, extremely well-versed and particularly familiar with Afghanistan and Pakistan full-fledged ambassador to Kabul, at which point I was brought back.
So how long were you there?
So initially I was there just from November to March, to the end of March.
Yeah.
By the end of March, Ambassador Vivek Karju, who had actually then been in Thailand, in Bangkok, he was brought there as ambassador. And he was our first full-fledged ambassador after the Taliban.
Yeah, but when you were there, it's very challenging time. We thank you. The nation thanks you for
Okay, thank you. My pleasure, really.
taking care at that.
It was an honor. And, the choices that you faced, there was the risk factor, the family's concerns were there. But at that time, all I thought was, this is the country has called you.
And building your experience in building the India's image abroad, that's very important as an ambassador. So what any experiences you can share with us?
Thank you. Just briefly, these were formative influences. I think what they most contributed to was just the ABC of diplomacy, number one. Number two, your general cultural exposure to the world. One of the things that perhaps attracted me to the Foreign Service through the friends I made even before was that they were people who were cosmopolitan. They were people who were exposed to the world. When India, particularly under Rajiv Gandhi at that time, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi launched the Festivals of India. And these were the first Festivals of India. I think the very first one took place perhaps in the UK, but the second and third took place in France and in the United States. And I was entrusted, of course, under the ambassador and the deputy ambassador in Paris at that time, to essentially, provide the shoulders and hands and feet for the execution of the Festival of India. And so that was really a kind of, I would say, more than just cultural diplomacy. It was a kind of branding of India. And in a way, they allowed you to bring the full diversity and richness and wealth of India's very diverse and mixed and plural culture. Everything from folk culture to the most classic of cultures, the ancient forms like the Kudiyattam to modern art, music.
And these kind of events, I think, also attract a lot of tourists later in India when they see these kind of events being celebrated by embassies and people becoming aware of it. So it, in a way, it directly impacts the tourism in India and ultimately the businesses and investment that we have. I think it's really great efforts during that time in Europe and in Asian countries to,
Yeah. Right.
use.
I would even add that, so one is that these were government initiatives, but what they equally spawned was a lot of private initiatives. So, new cultural associations came up. They promoted their own exchanges, and
Right.
eventually it led to a two-way exchange.
Hmm. Right. Right. And even there are students coming in, just learning about our culture to India. Uh, I'm going back a little bit again on Pakistan, Afghanistan.
Sure.
Uh, your experience, and I'm just coming currently. What is happening? What do you think about the recent Pakistan Afghanistan confrontation? I am not using the word war. I should have used the word war, but yeah.
No,
Uh,
I think confrontation is a better word also.
yes, yes, and seems
And
like
of
India
course,
now clearly
mm,
side, with Afghanistan, and there's a lot of diplomatic activity happening. Um, and there's back channel, perhaps diplomacy happening between India and Afghanistan. What do you think? Is it something we are doing right at present, or we should have just avoided uh, this completely being diplomatic, and India should have just
no, I don't think that would be a really viable answer. Though a lot of people have this kind of touch me not thing about the Taliban. The reality is that, you know, who is in power today or tomorrow, these are passing phases. What really remains is an enduring, lasting, historical relationship, uh, not just with Afghanistan as a country, but also with the people of Afghanistan. And I think when we take decisions like this, they operate at many levels. One level could be purely, tactical, security related. Um, Enemy's enemy is a friend. These factors certainly do play a role, and I think they can't be ignored. There can also be geopolitical and regional factors. What is the regional balance? One could have seen that perhaps India had lost some ground with the arrival of the Taliban in Afghanistan. The regional constellation of forces and powers were working against us, and this was an attempt, occasion to balance it. But there is also the fact that Afghanistan and India have been linked to each other through histories, and Afghanistan itself, in many ways, its economy has been in a way integrated to South Asia, and particularly prior to partition and well into independence India. It was Afghanistan's largest market for all its agricultural produce, and even now remains that. So there's even a kind of geo-economic angle to it. So I would say these operate at all levels, but I would also say one additional thing, that we should be mindful and we should be careful of not putting all our eggs in one basket. And we should also be careful not to sacrifice what are essential values. And those values include democracy, human rights, status of women, rights of women. And we should not forget that there are opposition political forces, uh,
yeah,
just as there was in Taliban 1.0. And it was those opposition political forces that came and, that were associated with us. And so we should not also always simply betray our friends. Now, that requires skillful and deft diplomacy, the ability to, hunt with the hounds and run with the hares,
mhm,
and, play uh, play several balls in the air. So I don't think we should forget that. But I would say, as far as the immediate is concerned, given the challenges that we face from a security point of view, as well as historical, civilizational realities, it is in our interest to keep the people of Afghanistan with us.
right, right, yeah, and especially in Delhi, we see many earlier Afghani people settling down, and they are now part of our culture, and we can actually see that they have adopted our culture, and you know Afghanistan is more or less we it's similar to India. So you're right. I mean, we cannot abandon the Afghanistan's
Yeah.
just because we're
But
having
we had done that.
friends.
I think we should also be mindful that to some extent, over this period, starting from August 2021, when the Taliban took over, we kept the Afghan people also at a hands off distance.
Right,
We had virtually closed our visa services. Travel had become really almost non-existent. We're very restricted. So yeah, this was a necessary course correction.
right. Oh no, personally, I agree on that. Uh, you were also in Syria, so just want to have your insights into what is happening now in the Middle East, particularly the Israel and Hamas, and there have been multiple ceasefires. I don't know how the current ceasefire will last, but this has a global ramifications. The, the peace in in that area. So, any insights into your tenure at Syria, and what do you see now? What is happening in the Middle East?
Well, arguably the period when I was in Syria, which was from 2000, forget now, 2006 to 9,
Hmm.
was actually one of the most hopeful periods in Syrian history, even though people might reflect on it otherwise. This was the period, I would say, the reform period of President Bashar al Assad. And the economy was opening up, foreign investment was coming in. People who had served or who had lived, of course, Syrian people had told me who had lived through earlier periods that there was greater openness and almost greater freedom during that period in Syria than there was in earlier phases. And the India-Syria relations also boomed. We had high-level visits, and in my time, we arranged a state visit of President Bashar al-Assad to India, which was a very highly successful visit, and it also led to a stimulation in our economic ties, in our business ties, and so on. So I would say that we were there at a good time, and it was a hopeful time. There was a lot of stuff that was kept suppressed during that period, and it was not at all obvious or necessary that this had to come out in the way that it did. But it's also true that the West in particular, but also many of the conservative Arab countries, took advantage of the so-called Arab Spring to destabilize and to destabilize Syria, particularly to remove President Bashar, partly because of geopolitical reasons, because President Bashar had allied himself to Iran and to Russia. So there were geopolitical games going on as well. But having said that, the explosion that took place in, I think, basically 2024, I think, was sudden, was unexpected. People didn't really expect it, though with hindsight and retrospect, you could see that these were being incubated. And now I think we have to look at what's coming up with some cautious optimism. It's been a very difficult challenge for the new government, but to some extent, they have been able to um, be inclusive. Syrian women were among the most free and well uh, open at that time. We should also consider the position of women, that along with conservative Islam, that their rights are not suppressed. So I think we should keep all these factors in mind. Um, and I would hesitate to say more because it's a very early experience. It's a very complicated region. You know what is happening in Palestine. You know what is happening in Gaza. You yourself referred to Hamas and Hezbollah and Israel's actions in all over the entire region. So it's a volatile, constantly volatile region where anything could happen anytime. And I don't think we are seeing really the grounds for regional stability in what is happening in Palestine right now.
Right, right. I mean, we keep on hearing about the ceasefire that takes place, but then After some time, it just breaks. Currently, we are, seeing some positive developments. I hope that this continues. But what do you think from geopolitical perspective? Will the peace will last now, or what are the factors that may impact it at present?
I wish that peace would last. I wish that there would be no violence, no more killings, no more starvation, etc. But the reality is that it's a very fragile peace. It is, uh, and it is driven by political convenience and by immediate political objectives. I don't think what has been provided there is the basis for any long-term solution at all. And this is just band-aid to allow something to happen.
Mhm.
And I regret to say that I don't feel that it will be lasting or permanent. And you cannot have stability and permanence by the permanent suppression of a people, or even the destruction of a country, and by the suppression of the rights of any single people.
Right. I think you used a great word. It's a bandit solution. So let's keep our fingers crossed and see what happens. There are so many efforts from both sides, but there less hopes for peace at present. But let's see. Let's hope that we have some positive outcomes. Coming to the east side, like
Right.
Myanmar, you've been a ambassador there, a diplomat there in that country, um, and recent coup that took place in 2021. Uh, what are your views? I mean, what was India's stance? Was it? Do you agree with that? And what is the way forward for further engagements of India's with Myanmar regime right now?
Yeah. I'm afraid not. Things are moving, and we may have missed some opportunities. I have served there. I've also visited Myanmar even earlier. What we are seeing in Myanmar since the 1960s is really a military dictatorship, and pretty much a suppression of popular aspirations and sentiments and opportunities. In fact, it was not just a dictatorship, but it was a very isolated dictatorship. It was an insulated dictatorship. Um, at the time of its independence in 1948, uh, Burma, as it was then called, was one of the more advanced and one of the best integrated um, countries to the region in the world, partly because of colonialism, but also because of institutions that they had created. I mean, universities, education system, and so on. So, for example, Rangoon used to be the hub of airlines and air
Yeah,
connectivity, a place that has now been taken over by Bangkok, right?
right,
And the country literally was driven back from being in the forefront of the ASEAN, well, what later became the ASEAN countries, Southeast Asian countries, to one of the most backward. In fact, it was one of the sort of backward countries of under least developed countries of Southeast Asia, in spite of being resource rich, huge, and really full of natural resources.
right.
So I think what we saw in 2021, what we first saw in 2010, 2011, was a reform when the military dictatorship decided to at least put up a civilian face. And they allowed certain amounts of media and political freedoms. Civilian government was brought in. Elections took place. In the elections that took place in 2005 were credible and fair and reasonably free, and it brought into power the most popular political formation in Myanmar that had been in opposition all this while, the NLD, led by Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. And Daw Aung San Suu Kyi also won the elections in 2020, which was, of course, annulled by the coup in 2021. So it was a total suppression of political aspirations. More than just political aspirations, it was also a total closure to the opportunities for the youth that had been opening up during that period of liberalization, starting with the USDP in 2010-11 up to 2021 under the NLD, with the transition of the 2015 elections when the USDP lost. The USDP was the political party fronted by, or created by the military of retired military officers until until the arrival of the NLD. So now what has happened is there have been certain geopolitical changes. Uh, at the end of 2024, the Three Brotherhood Alliance, the most potent part of the armed opposition, had managed to take over most of the border trading posts, almost one third of the townships, 90 plus townships, and two regional military commands out of the 16, I think there are. One was in the northeast in Shan State, very important command, and one was in the west, you can call it the southwest, in Rakhine State, abutting the Bay of Bengal. So two very strategic regional military commands had been taken over. And now we are seeing that the military is emboldened enough to recover some lost territory. One can argue how significant it is, but I think it is. And this has taken place with the help of very strong political support from China for the junta and against the ethnic resistance organizations. And what we are also seeing is, so to one extent, and that the junta has been able to announce elections that are going to come up starting on December 28th. Now, how much this is going to change realities, I don't know. I would think that they could project it as a successful election. It might get them some international legitimacy with the support of Russia, China, and perhaps India as well. I think India as well. I don't want to prejudge that. But you specifically pointed to what India could have done. So India could have played a much larger role, because India, as a democracy, as a pluralist democracy, as a federal democracy, had the highest credentials to be able to take a leading diplomatic role in the transition of Myanmar from a military dictatorship to a genuine federal democracy. And the opposition has framed its own charter of a federal democratic union. So it's a democracy, federal, as well as a union.
Yeah, particularly when we have commitment towards democracy and democratic form of government. As citizens, we expected more role from Indian government to be part of these developments that are taking place in Myanmar. Agreed. Sometimes we just decide that okay, let's keep our hands off the things that are going on. We don't know what is happening at the diplomacy level, but and there are many things happen because of the political reasons. Or there are a lot of geopolitical pressures that the government faces. Uh, uh, let's talk about your UN role.
Right.
You were at UN headquarters in New York. So, what do you think of UN as a body now, especially with President Trump's 2.0 regime that is there, and the multilateral diplomacy that we have to do now instead of bilateral diplomacy, perhaps failing. So, any suggestions on the role of UN, United Nations?
Right. So, this is no rocket science. Everybody agrees, everybody knows that the United Nations is not doing very well. Perhaps it's it definitely is in a crisis. Some people might even argue it's in a kind of terminal crisis.
Right.
But to be fair to the United Nations, we should understand that it is the sum total of its member countries and their ability to cooperate.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fundamental change that has taken place is that the sort of doctrines and dogmas that the world runs on has changed totally. Today, it is considered a kind of given truth that, all that matters is my country first, America first, Europe first, fortress Europe, fortress America. And I think this kind of doctrine, this kind of dogma has spread around the world quite uncritically. And the logical conclusion of that kind of my country first is, in fact, the opposite of multilateralism. It is the opposite of internationalism. It is, in fact, a Hobbesian world where you only stand for your own interests, selfish interests,
Right.
and even interests. Uh, there can be a range from altruism to enlightened interest to mutual interest to enlightened self interest. All these considerations exist. So, what we are seeing now is that the values itself that underpinned the United Nations are being eroded. And those values are actually coming from political leaders from both the North and South and East and West. And so long we have a prevailing philosophy and dogma of selfishness, I don't think multilateralism has a great future. Multilateralism uh, accepts and presumes and works on the basis that we cannot solve all of our problems alone, that we have to work together, and particularly in a world which is more one than ever, technologically, financially, even in terms of populations, cultures. This is actually going contrary to one direction of history. It's like working backwards to a direction of history. So,
In the light of your just observation right now, what do you think of the other UN bodies like UNDP? There is a regulatory authority, WTO, TRIPS. These are all signs of all the countries working together. You know,
yeah.
in a regulatory environment where you respect all other countries.
Yeah.
So, what will happen to these
So,
organizations?
so the UNDP was a development organization, and of course, that really depends on funding
Yeah,
from
exactly.
individual international companies.
Yeah. Even when you put unilateral tariffs, as we are seeing being done, that violates the whole WTO. Who will respect WTO
Right.
rulings?
Exactly. It undercuts, it undermines the WTO.
Right, right, right. Uh, just from our viewers' perspective and from my knowledge perspective, also we've seen, and this is your experience also. You were in defense, part of the defense department also. So how does it matter from IFS and then defense? How did that shift? And I'm not talking about India. I've seen in US and many European countries, the diplomats and people would be part of defense and then would be part of IFS.
Yeah.
Sometimes even secret services.
Yeah,
To be
sure.
honest.
Yeah. So, in fact, I would say that the post in which I learned most about diplomacy was in the Ministry of Defense, because I was dealing with defense relations with virtually all the major countries of the world, from the Russia, United States, even our opening to China under George Fernandez at that time, Iran, Israel, uh, uh, Southeast Asia, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, even Pakistan. We were talking about our, uh, about the, mm, uh, about uh, disengaging in places like, so all this was there. So I would say that in a way it gave me a much more well-rounded exposure
Yeah.
to security and strategic issues and the core of strategic issues. Then I got, working in an individual department, let's say a territorial division or in a functional division in the Ministry of External Affairs. So I
A lot of diversity and experience that a diplomat gets, I would say, not necessarily confined to diplomacy, but also from technical point of view, from defense perspective, and as you say, from intelligence perspective, you get a lot of experience on that. So my question is, what happens, after retirement? Is there what
well, there are
uh,
two choices.
you should be more vocal? I mean, about things, but I haven't seen, that much.
Right.
Responsibilities given to IFS. So what happens thereafter?
One is that you continue doing what you did for 30, 40 years, and either you find a political avenue for it, or you find a kind of media and think tank
Right.
avenue for it. I have done a bit of that, not the political, but on the
Exactly.
think tank side of it. But the other option is that you try something totally new and totally different. And so
Yeah.
I really opted for the second.
Mhm.
These days, I'm much more engaged in the sustainability and viability of the environment, small farms, and and yeah, sustainable agriculture and environmental protection,
Right, right,
mainly in the northeast, in the hill areas.
right, right. And perhaps there is another avenue, fourth avenue, you can say, is the private sector. Is there anything that the private sector would look forward from such a diverse? I would think so.
I myself held briefly some position as a heading a task force in the CII, and many of my other colleagues also played sort of very significant roles in trying to forge business and economic relations with other parts of the world. So yes, I definitely think that there is a lot of scope for that, and I think it is being utilized to some extent.
Exactly. So, looking back at your rich experience that you had as a diplomat, several countries, taking decisions, at the spur of the moment, difficult decision that will impact generations. So, is there something you feel that you could have done differently, or you did, maybe you made a mistake, or you could have done it differently? Uh, is there any? I know it's a difficult question, but perhaps
I think you take what life brings you.
right.
Circumstances directed me, I would say, to some extent into the foreign service. Yes, I had options. I had other interests, particularly in my early years after my Festival of India post in Paris and my exposure to great cultural personalities and cultural work. I did contemplate, a career more in the area of cultural criticism uh, and generally cultural scholarship. Well, then I tended to get branded, and I had done a lot of media as someone only good for soft assignments.
Right,
So I had to prove myself in some hard assignments like security related, Ministry of Defense, Afghanistan, and places like
right,
that.
right.
So yeah, I think just you take what life brings and try to make the best of it. And there is always life after retirement also, when you can do the things that you could not in your lifetime.
The current U.S. Indo-U.S. Trade. I won't use the word conflict, but the difference is taking place right now. What do you think of? Do you think there is a backstage diplomacy taking place right now, or is just the end? There have been we keep on hearing some good news and then some not good news for Indo-U.S. tariffs and trade talks that are going on. Um, so is there something that can be done? Is there hope?
So I think in the long run, things will find their balance and will find their own place. Whatever that place has to be, maybe with some correction. But for the time being, I think my disappointment is that we invested a lot. We have one of the largest Indian diasporas in the United States. I would not fault the professionals who are probably doing their job. I'm not fault almost anyone else, but
So thank you so much for joining. This has been very interesting conversation, Ambassador Gautam Mukhopadhaya ji. So we like to have more insight because this is such a changing and challenging, diplomacy efforts that are happening. So perhaps we'll have you again after some time to see
most welcome. Yeah.
happening across the world. Thank you so much for
Thank you
joining.
very much, and I hope it has been sort of interesting for your viewers as well. Certainly, it was a pleasure for me to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.